Hello and welcome back to the Nomadic Nurse Podcast, where we talk about all the above with the glory from the God from up above. In Jesus' name, amen. We are here to talk about a very important topic, and it's called burnout. Yes, this is a topic that I've brought up very discreetly or not so discreetly in previous podcast episodes, but we are going to nail it out now because this is a topic that everyone can relate to, whether you're a healthcare professional or not. And as we navigate this topic, I want to make it very clear that no profession is out of sight when it comes to burnout. You can burn out in anything, not just a profession, but anything. And no matter how big or small it may be, if you do things without replenishing your cup and refilling yourself, your mind, your body, your spirit, forget it. It's not going to work and you will burn out. So what I ask for you to do is, if you're a healthcare professional or not a healthcare professional, this is for you. This here is to help you tap in to understand, are you really going through what you're going through? Are you heading down a road of burnout? Are you burnt out? Do you know somebody that's burnt out? And how can this podcast relate to you? Now, we're going to be talking about it from the nursing and healthcare point of view because that's what I'm used to. But just because I do CPR on patients every day does not mean that your burnout story or your friend's burnout story or your loved one's burnout story is less valuable. And that's the important thing we have to consider, is that all your stories of burnout are extremely valuable and an amazing testimony, because there's always, if we put faith in the component of it and we fix our mind, body, and spirit, there's a beautiful testimony at the end of it where you can help somebody else as well. So I'm hoping that with this episode, my testimony and the knowledge that I've gained over time can help you and your loved ones identify the burnout, prevent burnout, manage the burnout, and come back to the best self that God has created you to be. And I'm going to start off with the verse of the episode, which I absolutely positively love. You'll be catching me going through this because I'm going to tell you something. This is an episode that is so dear in my heart because I've been burnt out several times, and it has taken me many times to try to film this, and it is 3 a.m. So we're not giving up. In Jesus' name. So we're going to turn to Isaiah 40, and we're going to turn to verse 29 to 31, and it reads, "He gives strength to the faint, strengthens the powerless. The youths may become faint and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary, and they will walk and not faint." Amen. I chose this verse because we are always seeking strength somehow, in some shape, size, or form, in the moments of deprivation. And we need to understand that we need to seek strength through God always. Always. We are not going to be strong enough for everything that He has out for us, and He wants us to lean into Him. So when I talk about this, we have burnt out in the most amazing positions, whether it be in ministry, whether it be as a nurse, whether it be as a mom, as anybody. We have burnt out before, or we are going to experience some level of burnout. And I pray that that doesn't happen to you, but at the same time, there is such an amazing testimony on the other side of that. We all are imperfect, and we will all fall into our fleshly desires, and we'll all fall into our own understanding. But when you have a higher power navigating you through the course of life, like God, it is by far the most amazing experience, because my chances of burning out is a lot slimmer compared to before. Is it 100%? Absolutely not, because I have the moments where I fall into sin. I have the moments where I will fall into my flesh, and I will not do things in righteously, or I might make mistakes, or I might think I heard God in some ways, but I may not. And it's very important that you get into the muscle and building the muscle of prayer and developing a lifestyle for that. But with that being said, this being on burnout led me to God. Now, at one point, I lost God along the way because I burnt out from a serious thing. And that was a year into nursing. But something always told me to never give up on the nursing profession and just keep on going. And I kept on going, and I didn't really have God in that process. It's only up until 2 years ago, and I've been a nurse for almost 13 years now. It's only up until 2 years ago that I truly devoted my life to Christ. And that's the thing. And I was trying to fill up all these other cups. I said, okay, things are not working in here. Where do I do? And the last thing that was left was my spirit. So we're going to tap into more of that. So God will give us strength. Man will always fail. And that is okay, because God has made us fearfully, wonderfully made, but we are not perfect. God is the only thing that is perfect in this world. And the beautiful thing is about He will renew our strength. He will make us soar like eagles. He will make us run and not become weary, and walk and not faint, because we are seeking Him in all things that we do. We are leaning into Him and not our own understanding. And that has been a pivotal moment for me. So with that being said, let's tap into what burnout is and how do we navigate all of this? How do we identify what's burnout and what are the causes of burnout? So the biggest thing that we have to also mention is this topic is going to relate to somebody that you know, whether you're a healthcare professional or not. And the definition of burnout is a chronic physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress. This can be displayed in many ways by different people. So everybody has different ways of displaying stress. Some people emotionally respond, some people more physically respond. There's a huge back and forth of what goes on with our bodies when we are going through high stress moments. And the truth of the matter is that what we have to understand is that stress is the killer, and we have to understand the source. It is one of the most common triggers for chronic illness. So when we tap into this, chronic stress leads to chronic illness down the line. So, which leads to just generational issues. We're changing up our DNA because of the amount of stress we're going through. For example, when I was going through my most recent burnout, I developed PCOS. And PCOS, I had it because my cortisol levels were so high because of my chronic fight or flight stage, because I was always just focusing on career, because in my life, a lot of other things in my life were kind of crumbling. Some things were good, but in all honesty, my health was crumbling. But my career was doing excellent, but I wasn't falling into the path with God. And at one point, I got so burnt out and so fried that I had to find a way to heal myself. And I remember being at the gym, crying my eyes out, weeping with my trainer in his arms, and I had no idea what more to do because of everything that I've been going through personally, career-wise, everything. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm burnt out. I can't fathom this anymore. And I prayed to God. I says, God, and at that time I was like, that's when I cried to Him desperately, even though I wasn't saved. And I said, God, move me up, not out. I move me up and not out. And lo and behold, I got a promotion. And this is something that, for me, if I were to have pulled out of the job for like a couple of months and went back, it wouldn't have been enough. I needed to change my environment entirely, but I still had an attachment that I wasn't ready to let go of at that moment. So I said, I want some more experience, but I need something that's not as physically demanding because I can't keep up with what's going on. And I gained an exponential amount of weight. I was very stressed. I was on the verge of developing cardiac disease, on the verge of developing diabetes. Like, I was in line for the chronic trifecta of illnesses. Like, it was diabetes, high cholesterol, and hypertension. I was literally in line for that. And I remember I was in the trauma bay and I couldn't stand because of how much pain my back was in because of all the weight I was carrying. And I know it's my weight because as soon as I lost the weight, my back pain started to relieve itself. And I'm just in a space where I needed to fill all of the pillars of my life. And it was a hard thing to accept. So I had all of those burned out, and then I stopped performing in my job. I stopped performing in my relationships, and my overall well-being was just declining, and I just didn't know what more to do. And when I got that promotion, I swear that was God's gift to me. I asked him, like, I need to get out of this situation. I don't know what more to do. And the minute I backed out and I backed up and I surrendered to him, it was such a moment of relief when I got that job, because it was a lot less physical demand. It was a more mental demand, but a mental demand that I was able to handle because my physical needed the rest. So when I got a doctor's appointment to help regulate my PCOS, I fell upon a fabulous doctor who I've known for years, and we ended up tackling this together, and my PCOS is regulated, and I'm so honored and I'm so happy and blessed. But when I was in the middle of fixing my PCOS, I'm like, but why don't I still feel rest? I just couldn't feel rested at all. So we're going to go into where I went with that. And the biggest common causes for burnout in the healthcare profession is long shifts with barely any recovery time. That includes when you're doing CPR on patients and you don't debrief, you don't take a moment, the fight or flight is still going, you're on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. There's high patient loads and high acuity loads, which can definitely increase the stress level. And this being a chronic thing over time can definitely lead to burnout. But here's the thing, some of these things do come with the job. But when it comes with a lack of support, this is where it becomes an issue. And then we have leading to emotional exhaustion because of all the things that the job comes with the lack of support. And then all of a sudden we're realizing that we're undervalued and underpaid. And it gives us this sense of helplessness and hopelessness, leading us to a burnout. Because we then go into this highly apathetic mode, or we become so emotional that we can't handle the situation. We can't handle where we work anymore. And then therefore maybe we're no longer meant for that department. Maybe we're no longer meant for that profession. And then we get stuck with dealing with the remains of ourselves. And this is the important thing as to why we have to be careful when we identify in our purpose. Because if our purpose is taken away from us, if our license is taken away, what are we going to do? What are you going to do if your profession is taken away from you? And that is your calling and your purpose. Your identity is going to go down the drain too? No. You will have a piece of an identity that's going to hurt. A part of you is going to hurt because that is something that you've identified as in a way, but it shouldn't be so intertwined. The reason why it shouldn't be so intertwined is because if you intertwine it too much, good luck untangling it when the time happens where your entire profession is removed from the palms of your hands. And this is heartbreaking. This is so sad because I was one of those people that had my profession, my calling, and my identity intertwined in one. And I had to understand that it's not the same. They're similar because God has given me an identity that will make me qualified for the calling. But the calling is not who I am. The calling and the purpose is the mission that God put me on. And I'm devoted to the mission that God has put me on. But God has given me qualities and desires on my heart that make me who I am, that I love to do to replenish myself so I can fill in the calling. I can move into the purpose that He has given me. And it's just wonderful when I identify it that way. So you may have your calling intertwine a little bit with your identity because it makes you qualified for it, but it doesn't mean that You identify as the calling. You identify as a human being that God created. You identify in Christ. That's what makes me feel 10 times better about my calling and preventing me from emptying myself to such a big state, because that's what it ended up being, especially during a pandemic. I had resources during the pandemic that was just incredible, that got a lot of things done, and was a lot of great healthcare resources. But at the end of the day, the minute that those resources get taken away from me, who am I? Am I going to be happy with myself? And sometimes we go through burnout just because of that. So a lot of things to consider here. And then after, you have the profession. The profession is a beautiful thing that you do. The thing that you do every day, you may love it. But here's the thing. When it's in a system that is undervaluing you and underpaying you, you have to remind yourself that it's not the profession or the calling that's doing it to you, but it's the system that it's under that is doing it to you. And that's a very hard thing to separate, because the thing is that the system is man-made. The calling is by God. And I realized this as soon as I stepped out of the province. As soon as I stepped into other provinces to see what's going on elsewhere, I really started to understand the issues that are going on within my province and how poorly treated and valued we are as professionals. The issues of the system and the profession is that we tend to believe that it's the same thing. The system that the profession is in is not the same thing. You can be extremely good at finance, but if you work somewhere where the treatment at work is not supportive, you will of course burn out. But here's the thing. Even if you're properly paid, but you don't have the remaining of everything, you work long shifts, you have high workloads, you have a lack of support, you have emotional exhaustion, you're still going to be able to burn out. Money is not the source of everything. So you have to ensure that all of your pillars in your life is fulfilled in some shape, size, or form. Sometimes you're going to give a little bit more into your finances. Some you're going to give a little bit more into your career. Some you're going to give a little bit more into your relationships. It all depends on the time, place of your life, but it has to be full to a certain level. Your cup has to be full in these areas to a certain level. Why are we working so hard for a job that doesn't give back to us in any shape, size, or form? I didn't get any eye coverage. I went into travel nursing. I got better insurance being a business owner than when I was a nurse in a staff hospital. And I'm still a nurse today. That's the crazy part about all this. And it's just insane how this cycle of burnout just persists and continues, because the system doesn't acknowledge the conditions that people are under. If people are happy with their salary, by all means, I ain't here to complain about that. You gotta love God above money. But the issue that I have is you're manipulating the people to work with the bare minimum and toying with their emotions, toying with their licenses, toying with lives of patients, so that because they can do the budget cuts and they'll perform anyways, but otherwise they'll lose their license, or a patient will die and they won't want to be responsible for that. It's no longer about providing compassionate and patient care. So then the professionals become these machines. So signs and symptoms of the burnout physical will be, you can develop chronic illnesses, but it will start off a lot like headaches and fatigue, muscle tension, insomnia. Insomnia, guys, I would get nightmares. It's insane how I get nightmares when I was burnt out. Emotional symptoms, detached from your patients, from work. You will lose the compassion and the love of nursing, of your profession, and increased irritability, depression. A lot of people have to go on medications to manage their burnout symptoms, and hopefully it doesn't develop into a chronic thing. I had to do it at one point, and I needed it in that moment. I didn't want it, but I needed it. And that's the crazy part. Behavioral symptoms is like you're going to be calling in sick frequently. You'll become difficult to work with, or somebody that you'll notice will become difficult to work with. hard to be accountable for you feeling burnt out because you don't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to accept it. And accepting it is step one. When you burn out, you are no longer identifying as who you are or who you've been created to be. And that's the hard part to accept, is that I'm no longer myself. I'm no longer fun to be around. I'm no longer compassionate. I'm no longer giving positivity anymore. I had a hard time accepting it, but it was by far one of the biggest things that I had to do in order to make the next step of my life a whole new one. It was certain behaviors that I was doing that people were luckily finding ways to still love me and be compassionate with me and hearing me so that I can heal properly. And the biggest thing is I burnt out so many times. Like, I burnt out first year at a nursing school, and I burnt out a couple more times in between that, I'm sure. But that was the first time after nursing school, was probably the time that I took 3 months off of work. But then I burnt out in 2021 heavily. And that burnout was by far the time that I had to see Christ. I had to see God. And that transition was so humbling for me because I had to stop and come to God and say, I'm so sorry for losing sight of you. Because it's not like I didn't know God. I've known him. It got so difficult when I worked in that emergency room. As much as I loved it so much, it was such a difficult moment because I had to accept that I was not okay. I had to accept that I worked so much between my company and here to fill a void, but all the other pillars of my life was completely going downhill. I had to do a huge self-assessment. I had to ask myself, am I okay? Am I being the nurse that I've been called to be? Am I also myself again? Who am I? Like, I literally intertwined my identity so much into my profession that I forgot who I was, what I like to do outside of nursing. And that's why I highly recommend having a certain level of separation from your identity and your purpose. Yes, they will intertwine a little bit, but when that purpose and calling gets stripped away from you for whatever reason, who do you identify as? And that's the important part that I want to highlight to everybody here. Do I dread going to work? At one point I did. I cried going to work, tried to put on such a brave face all the time, and it was just nonstop stress. When I got the promotion, this allowed me to look at my life a lot more holistically because I had more time to back up, look at what my life was like. Okay, this new job is mentally demanding but less physically demanding, so I will have a little bit more energy on reserve to attend to certain needs. I was able to identify that I was unhealthy physically, so I went to the doctor and I got in control of that. Because I was focusing on my physical health, this gave me more energy to put into my relationships and my family and my friends. And this gave me more room to settle the mental part of my life as well. So pillars started to fill up again. With one thing I forgot and I was trying to figure out is that as much as I was filling my physical cup, I was filling my mental cup, my relationships, my family, my friends, my social life, I was filling all these things up again. There was one cup I wasn't filling up, it was my spirit. And because I wasn't filling up my spirit, I was always in drought. And I couldn't figure out why I wasn't receiving rest. And then I kept on getting signs that you need to turn to God. You need to turn to God. I got multiple signs over years. And finally, I did it. And the rest that I have received is uncomparable to what anything on this earth can give you. So my biggest recommendation is that if you're going to help prevent and manage burnout, you need to look at all of the pillars of your life. You have to look at all of them, and you need to see how full are those cups. Some pillars may be a little bit more empty than others, and you have to figure out what can you afford in that moment to empty out a little bit. Some things you may have to settle with affording to have less in those cups. Sometimes you may have to cut down some relationships, and those are hard. Sometimes you may have to settle for the lower paying job or be off of work and get only 80% of your salary in order for you to fill up your physical, mental cup and eventually your spiritual cup. These pillars are so, so, so important. But you have to have faith that one day those cups will be filled equally all over again. Another thing to mention is rest and recovery. A lot of the times we end up sleeping for hours on hours, or we'll never sleep at all. We'll get such a heavy insomnia. I was insomniac, but I would wake up, I would stay up all night long, and I would try to sleep during the day. And when I tried to sleep, I couldn't knock myself out. I couldn't seek rest in my sleep. I would wake up still exhausted. And all these things are affecting my cortisol levels. And I'm not actually having any type of rest in any shape, size, or form. And this, for me, required medication. At that time, when I was in my burnout, absolutely required medication. And it was hard to accept because that medication made me gain a little bit of weight. But it forced me to work on my physical. Because if I just took the medications and slept, it wouldn't have filled up my physical cup. Was it hard? Of course it was hard, but I was heading down a path of chronic illness. I would have been 40 and already had all the trifectas of high cholesterol, hypertension, I'm sure, because my cardiac disease is a huge thing in my family. So I was setting myself up for that one. The other thing is that you have to set boundaries, but here's the thing with boundaries. If you're noticing that you're setting significant boundaries to the point where you can't break down those boundaries, that's called apathy. I actually like the term of it's like a catatonia. If you don't know what catatonia is a type of psychosis where you're blank, you wave your hand in front of your face and you don't really see any, you don't acknowledge it that it's there, you're in a whole other world. It's a type of psychosis that you get deep into. And a lot of people can get into this with anxiety. So they'll be so anxious that they'll freeze. And we'll give medication like benzodiazepines to help relax them. But what will happen is that they'll start to panic. They'll go out of the catatonia, they'll start to panic, get into this anxiety. But you got to continue to give them medications because that's a sign that it's working, because eventually they're going to come down and they're going to actually seek true rest. It's very important that when you set the boundaries are there to have enough room for grace. But they're boundaries to guard your heart. It's hard to identify at first, but you have to create room for grace, and you got to set boundaries like, sorry, I can't pick up that shift. And I will always ensure that people will take their breaks, or I take my break. These things are so, so important. And, sometimes we have this tendency of, no, I'll stay back, I'll chart, and no, like, put your chart away, sit and rest your mind. It's overstimulating, but make sure that you be careful with the apathy component, because when you set boundaries to the point where you don't let anything in and you don't care for your patients anymore, and then it slips into your family life, that's not setting boundaries. That is burnout. Find a support system, but be very careful with the trauma bonding and trauma dumping. It's very easy to trauma dump, but that can be hindering to your relationships. And if you're going to tell somebody about your issues, you also have to work on doing something about those things as well. If you're going to tell somebody that you're burnt out and you're going to talk about it all the time, you also have to make the effort to do certain things. Did you talk to a doctor? Did you take the time off of work? Did you start medications if you really need it? Did you go to the gym? Did you do things to seek rest? Or are you still doing these things that are not setting the boundaries, that are not feeding these cups? And if you're not, then it becomes just trauma dumping, and it's no fair for the person that's hearing it. Self-care practices, of course, exercising, nourishing your body, diet, and hydration, y'all. And again, like I said, faith-based strategies. I'm somebody that I had to turn to God for my last burnout, and it has been pivotal in my life. I recommend prayer, reading the word. It says here in Matthew 11:28, come to me, to all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And boy, did God give me rest. like my PCOS is regulated. My emotions are easier to navigate. I'm able to help people, and I found that God led me down to a path that was meant for me. I was like, God, where do you want me to go? I go make every decision now through prayer as much as I can. And it has relieved the burden off of my heart. And I gave my career to God, and He told me where we're going to go from here. And I'm a travel nurse across Canada now. Not everybody will have the same, will be able to do what I do, and that's fine. But this could be something different for you. And that's why I turned to the Spirit, because there's nothing better than a good spiritual rest. Because everything else fell in line after that. My health fell in line, my relationships fell in line, my physical health, my mental health, my finances, everything fell in line. All my pillars were fulfilled and have been fulfilled. And there will be times that I won't be perfect after today. And that's okay, because I have God and I can lean on Him. And it's going to be hard. It's hard. No one said that that's going to be easy. It will 1000% be difficult. There will be challenges that will come back in my life. But now I know how to navigate those challenges. I'm going through a challenge right now. And that is okay, because now I know how to navigate these challenges. God has a bigger purpose and calling for me. I can then step into that better, and I can handle the bigger challenges that are to come. So that's the beauty about all of that with being in faith. I've been advocating for change in the healthcare system for a very long time. I've worked as a nurse for 13 years. I love what I do. I don't like the system that it's under. I had to leave in order for me to have healing in my job. But I'm still a nurse. And I'm still working as a nurse. I'm working I'm again, travel nurse across Canada in emergency rooms. And I love it. I couldn't be more honored and blessed to be doing this. And I just can't wait for whatever God has for me. Make daily changes in your life that will bring you closer to your identity that God has created. You have to identify yourself first before you do any job. Because when that job is gone, what are you going to do? When that career is gone, what are you going to do? When these things that are so important to you that you put before God is gone, what are you going to do? I'm not saying it's going to be easy when those things leave you or people leave you. They will be difficult. It will be so challenging. But if you identify as a human before you identify as your profession, as your title, I promise you the healing process will be so much easier. Take it from somebody who identified a lot as their profession. There's so many people out there, moms, dads. I want to give you hope that the person that God has created you to be is such an amazing person, that you have such a great purpose on this earth. Just when it becomes difficult, just give it to Him. And it'll give you such a spiritual rest that it's uncomparable to anything in this world. You're not alone that going through this. There's so many people that are burning out, but it doesn't make it that you're less valuable. So I recommend you guys make a small change in your life today. Make a change in your life. Time blocking, making focus time, making sure that you make time for diet, exercise, water. I'm going to probably say that every episode. But make time and investigate the spiritual rest that you need. I'm telling you, as a testimony, it's pivotal. But remember that make one small change in your everyday life to make sure that you fill those cups, those pillars will be the first step to preventing yourself or managing the burnout that you're in or you're about to get yourself out of. Will we always be 100% healed? Absolutely not. But the beauty about it is that we have our spirit that can lead us. And we're just passing through, y'all. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here today on the Nomadic Nurse Podcast. I hope to share more with you about the burnout journey things that I've gone through. I will give some extra content regards to that. And yeah, I think there's just so much amazing things out there. And the healthcare profession is something that I hold dear to my heart, but also just replace healthcare professional with what you do or what your title is. And remember that you don't identify as that. You identify as a human first. That is my number one tip to you, is find out who you are first. What is your identity? What do you like to do? Start with the basics and then work your way up from there to go back into loving your calling. And if it ends up changing, that's fine. That's where God leads you to. And there's no shame in that game. I know plenty of nurses that shifted out of the profession. I know many people that shifted into the nursing profession. I've seen it. And my prayer to you is that you seek spiritual rest, a rest that can surpass all understanding, even in times of trials. Yeah. So without further ado, make sure you go into the Nomadic Nurse Network website, so nomadicnursenetwork.com. Subscribe to our newsletter. Take a look at our nursing services that we got, our healthcare services. We got a lot that just pulled up. Also, like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to share this. Maybe this is something that can help benefit one of your friends, your loved ones, yourself. And hopefully this can help you understand that you are bigger than just your title that you created for yourself. You are a great human that God has created you to be on this earth. So we're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. And I thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for the love and support. And stay tuned for more episodes. We have our episodes drop every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Bye.